Hello everyone, welcome back to my class. This is Rumana Ali. I hope you all are doing well in today's class. Materials and things. Let us discuss about the other properties of the different materials. So here we can find the change of solid to liquid, and the liquid can also be converted into gases on being heated. And the next point that we need to remember here is gaseous substances can be converted into liquid, and the liquid can be converted into solid on being cooled. So these are the two statements that has been given based on which we can say that on being heated these changes occur, and on being cooled here we can find these changes. Let us take some examples to understand these two statements. How the solids are going to be changed into liquid on heating. Let us see first. So when you put some ice cubes in a lemon juice, will they dissolve? Definitely, they are going to be dissolved within few minutes. So on being heating, these ice cubes that are solid, they merge into the lemon juice and they are going to be changed into liquid. In this way, solid can be converted into liquid on being heated. The next thing that is given here is liquid to gas. How the liquids are changes into gaseous form. When you take the water in a beaker, when you boil it, after some time you can find steam that flows into the air. That steam is nothing but gas, which is also called as water vapor, and the water which is present in the beaker, it is liquid. So here we can clearly see that the liquids can changes into gaseous form on being heated. So the first statement is clear now. Let us see the second one, how the gases are going to be converted into liquid on cooling. So when you, in the chapter rain, we have already discussed about the formation of clouds and also about the rain. Here let us take the example of that process only to understand how gases are converted into liquid. So when you see the water vapor which are present in the atmosphere on being cooled, when cool air touches these water vapor that are present in the atmosphere, these gaseous molecules will become liquid and they are going to fall as rain. So water vapor is a gaseous form of a water that forms cloud, but when the cool air touches the cloud on being cooled, these water vapors changes into water. In this way, gaseous substances are going to be changed into liquid one on cooling. The next thing is liquid to solid. How the liquids are changes into solid on cooling. So here we can take a very simple example. That example is when we keep water in a tray, or when we pour water in a tray, and when we keep this tray in a refrigerator in cool temperature. So on cooling, this liquid can changes into solid. That means water can changes into ice cubes. Water is the liquid and ice cubes are solid one. So in such a way, the liquids can turn into solids on cooling. This is the way how the different substances changes their state. The different materials are classified into three main types based on their state, and that substances are solid, liquid and gas. Solid substances are the substances that do not change their shape. For example, vegetables, fruits, they do not change their shape. So they are called as solid shape. And even if you take an example of this marker, this also do not change its shape. So it is in a solid state. The next one is liquid. Liquid is also a state of substance. And when you pour any water or juice in a container, then they take the shape of that container. For example, if you pour water in this bottle, then it takes the shape of this bottle. But if you pour water in a beaker, it will take the shape of the beaker. In this way, liquids are the substances that do not possess their own shape. They take the shape of the container in which it is going to be poured. So these are called as liquid substances, and gaseous substances are smoke and water vapor. They also do not have any shape and they do not even take the shape of a container. So in this way, based on the state, the substances or the materials are classified into three types: solid substances, liquid substances and gaseous substances. So children, you might have heard about the story in which an ant fell in a tank, but this ant takes the support of a floating leaf, and by taking the support of this floating leaf, it reaches the bank of the tank. So here the ant uses the scientific knowledge, and based on this we can find two more properties of the different materials, and that properties are sink and float. Some materials will sink down in the water and some materials float in the water. Let us see what are the different materials that sinks and the different materials that floats on water. So here when we take one beaker, pour some water. Now pour the different things like tomatoes, brinjal, potato, stone, piece of chalk, iron nail, sponge, wood, leaf and paper. When you put all these things in this tank, you can find that some of the materials will float on the water and some of the material will sink down into the water. So the materials like tomatoes, brinjal, potatoes, stone, piece of chalk and iron nail, these are the materials that sinks in water. But the materials like sponge, wood, leaf and paper, they will float on water due to their less weight. If an object contains lesser weight or lesser volume, then that objects will float on water, and if the density of the objects are more, then they will sink down into the water. So here these two properties can be seen which are possessed by the different materials. Here we'll take one more example, that is a piece of wood. When you put a piece of wood, it will float on water, but when this wood is molded in a box, and if you put this box into the water, then this box will sink down in water. So in this way, the material in one shape will sink, and when it is molded into another shape, it will float. The different materials can either sink or it can float based on their properties and based on their volume and even on their density. The materials which are floating on the surface, they cannot be made to sink down, but the materials which sinks into the water, they can be made to float. Okay, so this is about the property of the different materials. Take 5 beakers, pour some water in all these 5 beakers. After taking water, add 1 spoon of salt in the first beaker. In the second beaker, add 1 spoon of sugar. In the third, we'll take chalk powder. And in the fourth beaker, we'll take sand. And in the fifth one, we will take sawdust. Now stir it well. After stirring it properly, and after a few minutes, when you observe, you cannot see the salt in the water because it dissolves. It will mixes up with the water. You cannot see the sugar as it also dissolves in the water, and even you cannot see the chalk powder that is present in the water because it also dissolves, it also gets mixed with the water. But when you see the beaker 4th and 5th in which you have taken sand and sawdust, in these two cases you can find the sand settles at the bottom of the beaker, and even the sawdust will be present in the water that has been taken in a beaker. So the sand and sawdust, these two materials will not mixes up with the water. They do not dissolve in the water and they will remain in their state. They do not dissolve in the water. So the substances that are mixed up with the water, they are called as soluble substances, and the substances which doesn't dissolve in the water, they are called as insoluble substances. This is how we can find the properties like soluble and insoluble also. And even when you take the liquid substances in a beaker of water, for example, if you pour vinegar and if you pour lemon juice in a beaker containing water, then these two liquids will also get mixes up with the water, and these liquids are called as soluble liquids. But when you pour oil and when you pour kerosene in this beaker, you can find a layer over the surface of the water. You can find a layer of an oil and a layer of a kerosene that exist on the surface of the water. In this way, they do not mix up with the water, and these kind of liquids that forms a layer over the water, these are called as insoluble substances or insoluble liquids. These are the different properties that are shown by the different materials that are present around us. In the lesson Materials and Things, we have discussed about the different materials and the different properties of the materials. For example, the materials will be either shiny or they will also be non-shiny. They may be hard or they may soft. They will be soluble and also insoluble. And some substances will be solid or liquid or gaseous one. And some of the substances will sink into the water and some may float on water. So these are the different properties that are shown by the different materials. Here the lesson Materials and Things ends. I'll be back with a new lesson. Meet you in next class. Goodbye.